Welcome to DocFest at Home. Welcome to the 35th edition of the International Documentary Film Festival in Munich. But this year, everything is a little different. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we decided to present the whole festival program online, therefore DocFest at Home, because you can stream from the convenience of your own home. And therefore, I would like to welcome not only our Munich audience to the festival, but also everybody else who is watching the screening and the program of DocFest from wherever you are. My name is Sylvia Bauer. I'm one of the programmers for the festival. And I'm very happy, and it's my pleasure to present to you the documentary, hybrid documentary, as I might say, Days of Cannibalism, which is a French, Dutch, and South African production by the director Teboho Atkins. And we screen Days of Cannibalism as part of our section Doc Horizonte. The film Days of Cannibalism, you can vote for the film for the Kino Publikumspreis. This is our audience award that is donated by Bayerischer Rundfunk and Dreisat. And you can use the button on the film website if you like to vote for Days of Cannibalism to receive the audience award of our festival. I'm very happy that the director of Days of Cannibalism, Teboho Atkins, can join us today for a short Q&A of the film. And I'm very happy to see him here, live from Berlin at the moment. Great to have you here, Teboho. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for programming the film.
Your film has the premiere a couple of weeks ago at Berlinale in the Panorama section. Back in February, COVID wasn't really an issue, or not so much of an issue in Germany. How has the pandemic affected your life and your plans and your work for the time being?
Well, I would, probably be in Munich with you right now. I didn't have any filming planned for these few months, so I'm lucky in that sense. But I was planning to go to all these festivals and present the film, I would really like, for me, making a film and then showing it at a festival means interacting with the audience, so I can experience the film in real time with the audience, and I'm missing that a bit, I must say. Like in this virtual space, you kind of let it go, and it's online, it's out there, and you don't really know what's happening or how people are. It's, the film's still my, it's still my baby, right? It's still fresh. So I'm a little bit protective.
Curious about the reactions of the audience, probably.
Exactly.
The title of the film is Days of Cannibalism, and the film ends with a shoot of cows seemingly eating other cows. Can you tell us a little bit about this scene and about the metaphor of cannibalism in regards to your film?
Okay. Well, I think first I should say that the name of the film comes from a bar. It's the name of a bar in Lesotho, a bar called Days of Cannibalism, a very small bar, which we frequented a lot while I was researching the story and trying to find how to make the film. And of the many names that I had, Days of Cannibalism is the one that stuck, and somehow it carries the film on many metaphorical and symbolic levels. And so when we're filming the scene with the cows, and the cows started eating these bones, which I think they do just for salt, maybe every morning, it just felt like the perfect moment to end the film with. I remember clearly as we were filming the scene, how we both looked at each other, Sam, the cameraman, and I, and thought, this is perfect for our film. So what that title means metaphorically, I mean, where to start, On one hand, it's about, the film's about capitalism, it's about economics. It's about people eating from another economically. It's about the days in which we live and how these economic systems are expanding, about the globally. So it's about the days of economic cannibalism. It's about how people treat each other, the sort of latent aggression and violence that kind of mounts throughout the film. Or it's about the potential cannibalism, the kind of the nourishing oneself of the other person. I don't know. I mean, what else? Lesotho has a very strong. There used to be cannibals in Lesotho about 200 years ago, and the first king of Lesotho, Morena Moshoeshoe, captured them and didn't execute them as everyone expected, but he pardoned them. He pardoned the cannibals because he said, "My father, the grave of my father is in your stomach." Mm-hmm. And then they became very loyal subjects, mm-hmm. And that's kind of one of the most famous acts of political diplomacy that I know of in the African continent. And it's sort of it kind of shows that there is also a positive light to cannibalism. Mm-hmm. I don't know. so cannibalism, the film is sort of it's meant to show how people can descend beyond this violence and somehow kind of forgive each other as well, if one keeps the history of Lesotho in mind. Yeah.
So we talked in more general terms now about capitalism, and that the film is set and based for the most part in Lesotho in South Africa. But it starts off in China, I think, in a hotel. And so the main issue is also one of globalization and how Chinese businesses interferes with South African economy, and how South African businessmen try to do business in China. How big is the issue? Because we are seeing a lot of scenes that are more in a rural environment. Is there a big difference between rural and urban environments? Or what can you tell us about the situation of Chinese investment and businesses in South Africa in general?
Well, one thing I learned or understood that there is no Chinese investment in Africa. That kind of, there's no one glove that fits the term. When I started the film, I had this sort of idea, or it's sort of this very vague notion of, the Chinese are in Africa and they're expanding and they're nourishing themselves from this continent. But the more and more I got to know the people, they're really just individual people with individual families who are going out to try their luck. It's not some sort of, in my experience, some sort of neo-colonial wave or some sort of plan by the Chinese government to take over African businesses. Sure, they sponsor parliament sometimes, or build a stadium or roads. But the Chinese that I met are just individual clans or families that are looking to better their lives. So I decided to focus on one place, Thaba-Tseka, which is in Lesotho, which is in the center of South Africa, and a place that's extremely remote. Because I thought that if the place is very remote, it kind of creates its own universe, which can be a metaphor, which can kind of like not be metaphor, but can stand in for what's happening elsewhere in the continent. So on one hand, the film is very specific. It's about this one place, Thaba-Tseka, with its own traditions and rituals and people. It's also something that can apply to other places on the continent.
Mm-hmm. The landscape of that part is breathtakingly beautiful and actually reminds a little bit of like Western films. And you described the documentary film yourself as a hybrid and as a kind of Western documentary. How did you come up with this idea of the Western and the new frontier and pioneers and gold rush and stuff like that?
Well, the film's a contemporary documentary Western. This is my logline. That takes place between China and Lesotho. Why is the film a Western? On one hand, superficially, it's the landscape, it's the horses, it's the nature. But why it really is a Western for me is that it's because it takes place in a location where the rules are in flux. Mm-hmm. You know, through the arrival of the new settlers, the pioneers, who come there maybe because there's like an atmosphere of a gold rush or some sort of potential to explore new frontiers. Mm-hmm. It creates this situation where the old rules no longer apply because of the new arrivals, right? The system's out of balance. Mm-hmm. And there's a kind of a sort of anarchy or a latent violence in trying to kind of establish who is stronger, you know? And for me, that is the essential frontier situation. So all these terms, frontier, pioneer, gold rush, settlers, you know, build the Western for me.
Mm-hmm. A stock figure from a Western is also the sheriff, and we also have like a police guard in the film and a district court. I assume it's very or not so easy to gain permits to actually shoot a film inside of a prison or district court. How did you happen to achieve that? Was it easy? Was it difficult?
I spent many years negotiating. Well, I mean, I grew up in Lesotho, right? So I grew up in Lesotho and I speak the language, and it really is. I know I have deep connections and deep roots to the place, you know. So with patience and trust, you know, people, you know, mm-hmm. I managed to get permission to film with these locations because they trusted me, and I hope I repaid their trust in a good way. Okay. But for instance, the court scene is problematic because we were not allowed to film a real live court mm-hmm. session, mm-hmm. because they argued, you know, that the camera would influence the judge, perhaps, you know, he might be too lenient or too strict, you know, and one could have an appeal against that. So it is so we're working with actors in that scene.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But people who are acting themselves, huh? Everyone is themselves. The judge is always the judge. You know, the prisoners are cattle thieves, but the scene is directed.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, the scene is about cattle thieves, and the judge issues a verdict of 10 years for stealing some cows, which from German perspective seems a little rash, but it pinpoints that cows have a very specific value in the society. Can you tell us a little bit about this specifics?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's one of the main premises of the film. It's a film about cows, right? And the importance of cows. Well, within traditional Basotho culture, a cow has a kind of a symbolic value within the community. You know, you mark important days like funerals or weddings, you know, or birth by saying sacrificing a cow. But it also has an economic value where you don't have a bank account, so you invest in cattle because it's a long-term investment. And a cow keeps your status within the community. Say you work somewhere else and you send money back home. If you invest your money in cows, it's a wealth that everyone can benefit from, right? Mm-hmm. So a cow is kind of a communal currency, a communal economic coin that the society uses and is built upon. One marries into a family by negotiating a bridal price with cows, you know. So it's kind of and that keeps families in constant dialogue with each other. So the cow is much more than just an animal. It's the god with the wet nose, as they call it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't actually have a fixed price as such. You know, its value is symbolic and metaphoric. And what is happening now is that because Chinese have arrived in Tawazeka, they've started investing in cattle themselves. Mm-hmm. But they invest in the cows just for money, because you can buy it and they kind of calculate, you know, how much it's worth and how much they can sell it for. But the moment an outsider comes in and invests in the traditional currency, the traditional cow, the cow just becomes a piece of meat. Whereas before, the cow had an economic value that was much more than its value in, you know, kilograms. The moment the Chinese come or an outsider force comes in and disrupts the economic balance, it just becomes a piece of meat, right? And for me, this is really interesting because that's how it shows how the world is changing by the presence of the outsiders in very subtle but very super profound ways.
Mm-hmm. And also,
and that is why sorry, and that is why, to go back to you get 1 year per you get 1 year jail term per cow you steal. That's because it's more than just an animal,
Just an animal, yeah. And it also points towards the fact that there are conflicts arising between the indigenous population of Lesotho and of the newly arrived Chinese populations. There is one scene in your film where you actually appear on screen. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's the scene at the end, the attack, which is filmed by the CCTV camera. And one doesn't recognize me, but I'm the one character who's lying there and who tries to hold a little girl, and then she escapes my arms. And that was one of our final days of filming, where we were with. It was the day of the World Cup final, half an hour before the final, and we came because we wanted to maybe film a scene with the Chinese. It was quite difficult, and we had to kind of create something. And I had this idea of maybe filming the World Cup final with them, and we'd have a moment of, I don't know, globalization. Or so we hung around, and then half an hour before the match began, we were all attacked. And we were attacked at that time because the whole village, the police, everyone is watching the football, right? So what happens, you see, and then we were tied up, and it was a bonding experience.
Mm-hmm. So the hybrid Western documentary turned into a kind of criminal story, thriller-like documentary.
Well, it's the duel at the end, no?
Right, it's the duel, yeah. What are your plans following Days of Cannibalism? Do you have any ideas about future projects?
Yes, I mean, I have a few ideas, but because my previous films I made some gangster films, gangster documentary films, and now I made my Western. I've been thinking of making a horror documentary, a contemporary horror documentary, and I'll probably do it in South Africa. And I sort of have a place in mind, and I can just sort of see the flickering lights, in like a small town in the middle of nowhere, and kind of this atmosphere of dread. Yeah, I don't know. It's still very much in the idea is just germinating.
Germinating, which is a good word to end an interview during the pandemic, I think. Thank you so much for joining us, Teboho Atkins. It's a pleasure talking to you. And I invite all our audience to watch Days of Cannibalism on our streaming channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I also want to remind you that you can vote for Days of Cannibalism for the Audience Award for the Kino Publikumspreis, donated by Bayerischer Rundfunk and Reisat. And our online festival runs until the 24th of May. And I hope you have many nice following encounters at our festival, DocFest at Home. Thank you for joining us.